Hey guys, it's time for the explanation on the long overdue holiday train project. So this thing's still not anywhere close to being done. That's one thing that I will have to say right now, and from that camera shot you can kind of see it, but this project actually dates back over 2 years. It's actually over 2.5 years. Way back in March of 2014, I did a layout update video, which I think was number 13. If you wanted to go back and watch that, it's not a very good video, but anyway, if you want to go back and watch that, that's where I kind of originally hinted at this idea. And I had bought 4 rail cars because my original plans were to spell out Union Pacific Holiday Train, because there is a Canadian Pacific Holiday Train that actually runs in real life. So I wanted to make the model Union Pacific Holiday Train, since this layout's pretty much all Union Pacific stuff. But anyway, that video is where the original plans came from. And what I wanted to do was make like wooden templates, which I'll show you later. I actually do have some of them. But wooden templates of where these LEDs would go. And then I was actually going to drill holes into the sides of the cars. And that didn't really work out that well, mainly because I couldn't get the LEDs for the letters to line up all that well, and it didn't look very good, so I didn't want to do that. I also really didn't want to drill holes in the car, so I'll explain how I made these a little bit later and kind of what I want to do with them in the future. Like I said, this thing's over 2.5 years in the making, so and it's not even like halfway done now. But the current plans, I have Holiday Train. If you can't tell what that is, it's a lot easier to see when it's lit up. But I still want to have 4 cars, but I'm going to have the 2 that say Holiday Train, and then behind it I'm going to have cars that just have like Christmas trees and stuff like that on them instead of words. So I'm not going to spell out Union Pacific Holiday Train. Anyhow, this is where it's at now. These are RGB LEDs, and I should go ahead and just kick the thing on. Alright, just to show you in the sort of most basic sense that I can, with the power supply kicked on here. All it does is it says Holiday Train. It says that on the other side too. And it just kind of flashes in a different pattern. And I actually went and I watched videos of the real Holiday Train, and I got the color pattern off of that. Now, on the real ones, the letters that are in the middle of this are just red. I went ahead and made mine the RGB colors as well. But anyhow, that's what that looks like when it's lit up, if you haven't seen that yet. But anyway, the original plans for this were to have a caboose, which gives the power for the entire train, which that's still there. I was going to have the caboose. I was going to have 4 cars. I was going to spell out Union Pacific Holiday Train, and the 4 cars are just going to have holes drilled in them for the LEDs. Now, that has since changed. I have this caboose, which the power is coming off of. This is actually a really nice caboose, by the way. I got it for a pretty good deal out at a train show, but it's got all kinds of little details and stuff in it. But I'm just tapping power off of this thing. There's no real damage done to it. This is just a random box car, which I had actually originally bought for this project. And this has the power supply circuitry in it, so if I can get this off one-handed, hang on. So underneath that car, and this thing does just pop off of here because it's not held in by any way, but underneath that car it hides all the power supply circuitry. So this is tapped straight off of the trucks, so the 18 volts AC from the track. This goes into a bridge rectifier, which is kind of messy here. I just slobbed liquid electrical tape all over that to insulate it, but it works. Anyway, that goes into a bridge rectifier, which converts the AC from the tracks into DC that I can work with here. This is actually just a big capacitor, and what that allows me to do is actually hit quite large gaps in the track that don't have any power and continue to keep these lights on for a couple seconds at least. Then after that, this is a buck converter. I'm getting about 25 volts or so out of this, 25 volts DC. This takes that 25 volts DC and converts it down into 4 volts DC, which is what the rest of this runs off of. Now, as you can see, these are unfinished cars. There's no top on them, there's no sides on them. The bottom's not completely done either. So, going into that, there's another connector. Then all this stuff is the low voltage, like 4 volts. And I'll give you a closer look at these circuit boards and stuff that are in here or later, but anyway, you can see this is a lot of soldering work, just hours and hours of soldering these LEDs together. It's quite a pain. It did work in the end. It worked fairly well. So anyway, that's kind of what the insides of those cars look like. Now, one thing that was a bit of a challenge was getting data essentially back and forth between these cars, or mostly just to the cars. Now, originally I was going to have one main car in the center, and I was just going to run wire tethers between the cars, and that turned out to be rather impractical because it would have had to have like 24 pin connectors, or actually it might have been higher than that because I have 6 on each car. So essentially 6 pins because I have red, green, and blue for the word in the center, and then red, green, and blue for this outside ring of LEDs. So I would have had to have a fair number of pins going back and forth between the cars, but I'm just going to have one middle car be like a command station. And then I stumbled across these little things, and those are actually wireless transmitters. So anyway, those things are just real cheap wireless transmitters, and they actually work good enough for this at least. So I'm just transmitting data off of this car, and then this car receives the data, and also once I get, there'll be 2 more cars behind this in the end, once this is completely done, and those 2 cars will receive the data off of this as well. And that stuff's already all set up actually. It's just not here. I don't have the other cars. Now, one thing that I am kind of thinking about doing now is the trucks that are on these cars right now are just real cheap things. I pulled them off of some, I pulled those trucks out of these flat cars, which I bought at a train show like last year. And I bought a fair number of those for pretty cheap. But anyway, those trucks, the wheels are too close together on them and they're real cheap. They don't stay on the track very well. But what I kind of want to do is get better trucks. I know I'm going to get better trucks, but I'm thinking about getting powered trucks. And since these things don't really need any connection between each other, I'm just thinking about doing powered trucks and doing all the voltage regulation individually on the cars, so I have no wires between them to worry about. I think that would work better, and it would look a lot better as well. Then I could just stick it on the track and I don't have to worry about wiring them together or anything like that. But anyway, these are hooked up to little microcontrollers here, little Arduino boards. So anyway, I'll show you like the code and everything else for that. Now on to how I actually made these cars. So I said that I didn't want to drill holes in the side of my cars, which is sensible enough, I thought. These cars, and the sides of the cars, and also this white piece of plastic down here that the trucks are mounted to, those are actually 3D printed parts. Since I started this project, I have acquired a 3D printer, which actually helped out quite a bit for this project, since I didn't have to drill the holes. I didn't have to worry about getting them lined up perfectly, basically, when I was drilling them. So it was pretty easy, actually, just to, well, it wasn't real easy to line all these holes up in the 3D CAD software. But anyway, I got that to work and then just printed that out. LEDs popped right in there without too much modification. I had to drill out some of the holes a little bit, but they worked. And you'll notice there is a seam in the middle of these where they got glued together, and all this stuff is kind of glued in place. So as for the rest of this train, I put a little bit of thought into how I was going to set this up, but I put, it's kind of a buffer car in the front. I've got these 2 cars, the power supply car, the caboose for power, another kind of buffer car. I put a random flat car with a golden spike on it, and then I put my passenger cars behind that, and that's somewhat similar to what the real train looks like. But anyhow, that's how this stuff works. I'll go ahead and show you some of the other stuff that I have from the building of this project that you might find interesting. Alright, so we're going to start off looking at the control circuitry here. Now, there's not a whole lot to this, but basically what I have here is a microcontroller. The particular microcontrollers that I am using are Arduino Pro Minis, mostly because they're cheap and they just fit right into these projects. So anyway, microcontroller there. Some of you may have heard of using Arduino in model trains before, but doing things like controlling switches and signals and doing other sensing type things. But anyhow, this little guy is an NRF24L01 Plus, which doesn't really mean anything, but these are little radio transceivers that I'm using to actually get data to the other cars. So this would be just a receiver. The transmitter ones, well, I mean, they're the same modules actually. It just depends on whether you tell it to send data or you tell it to receive data. But anyway, that's how I'm actually getting data across to change colors. And then this is a bank of MOSFETs and resistors. Now these are a logic level MOSFETs, so I can just hook the outputs of the microcontroller directly into them to turn them on and off. And these will actually handle like 10 amps or something like that. Pretty good amount of current. And then I just have one large power resistor for every color of LED. And let's see here. The red and green LEDs are 5 ohm resistors, and then the blue and green LEDs are 5 ohm resistors, and then the red ones are 10 ohms. And that just gives them about the same amount of current to flow through them, so they're about the same brightness in theory. But anyway, that's what the control circuitry looks like. If I did it again, I'd probably get a bigger piece of perf board to mount all this stuff on, and then actually stick everything onto that one board instead of having it kind of floating in the air and then the board of the bank of MOSFETs. So anyway, I'll go ahead and show you some of the original templates. And these are made out of like 3/8 inch plywood or something like that, but this was the original thing. I was going to like clamp this to a car and then just drill holes through it. And I was only really happy with one of these, and that was the word train, which I actually did solder together. I never drilled any holes in the cars. The word train actually did turn out okay. So that's that. And of course I'm not using this one. I'll probably put it in some other sign or something. But anyway, that's what Holiday looked like. And I had 4 different cars. 2 of them were the same size and 2 of them were different sizes. So you'll see that here. So that's what Union looked like. And you'll see this one, different size. Alright, so you see that the sign that says Pacific on it's quite a bit smaller. It's about the same width though. So that was one of the cars I was going to use. I'm really looking at these now. They're not that horrible, but they're still not that great. So here's Holiday in a different size. This is Union again. That's another different size. I think that's a really small one. And we have one of the train ones. And Pacific again. And this is just a blank one. But anyway, that's what those look like. I still have more rings of LEDs, so these will be used for making the other cars. And there's the other train sign, because I did go ahead and make both of those. Now, There's the rings of LEDs that go around the outside. And these are standard common anode RGB LEDs, and you'll see that they have 4 connections coming off of them. One's for the positive power, and then all the other ones are for the different colors, and you just connect those to ground to get them to light up. Through a resistor so you don't push too much current through them, but anyway, that's what those look like. There's quite a lot of work soldering all this stuff together. The LED rings like this were quite a bit of work on their own, and the soldering words is actually the hard part. Even though they have less LEDs in them, that's just kind of a pain to do it. Anyhow, I'll go ahead and show you at least one more thing here on the computer. But for those that are curious, this is the 3D printer that everything was printed on, and this is actually the filament that I used as well. This is one of the RipRap Prusa i3 printers. Is something that I put together in a kit. It wasn't too horribly expensive because of that, but anyway, all of the plastic that I used is just this PLA stuff. It worked fairly well. All right, so we're going to take a look at some of the stuff that we have here. This is one of the car sides. So this one says Holiday on it. Well, obviously. But basically, it's just a whole bunch of holes stuck in a flat sheet. Now on this side, I actually went ahead and put like a chamfer on them to try to get the LEDs to slide in a little easier, and it worked out reasonably well. So anyway, with that, I did have to split this down the middle in order to actually print it, because this is way too big to actually fit on my print bed. So that's what Holiday looks like. This is what Train looks like. That stuff off so you can actually see it. Anyway, that's what Train looks like. Not really any different than what the real one looks like. Lastly, this is where the trucks are mounted to. This is the little mounting plate for that, and this is basically, I just pulled the design that's off of those flat cars. There's a little circle where the truck kind of sits on, and then that's center is where it's screwed into. Then I just put the chamfer on the edge to try to glue it, or get a decent spot to glue it down. And that hole just runs all the way through for the screw. But anyway, that's all the different 3D designs that I have so far for this. Looking at some of this other stuff, these are the bits of code that I have. So this is the second car, which is actually the transmitter unit. So this code's not really optimized that well, but we'll take a look at it. Alright, so basically what I'm doing here is setting the colors. So this would have been like 0 would have been off, 1 would have been red, 2 would have been green, and 3 would have been blue, if I remember this correctly. And then you'll see this sort of number 1 and 0 thing. That would be for car 1, 2 and 3 would actually be car number 3, and then 3 and 4 would actually be car number 4. Sorry, 4 and 5 would be car number 4. So those are the colors, and if I'm remembering this correctly, mind you, I did this 2 years ago. Like number 0 would have been that LED ring around the outside. Number 1 would have been the letters for that same car. And this would have been the LED ring around the outside for the that'd be the third car, and then this would be the LED letters for the third car, and then that would be the fourth, and the letters for the fourth. And then these are the actual ones for this car. So setting red, green, and blue to the correct values there, or the proper, whichever ones needed to be turned off or on. Those are what those are. So these would be the ones for car 2. And then I actually send that out. So this radio.write thing, that actually sends all of this data over the air to the other cars. And I actually send it 5 times just for redundancy. And then there's a 2-second delay. Set the colors differently, and then send out that data. another delay, set the colors differently, send out that data, and do it again. So there's 4 different color patterns. And then on these other cars, let's go to car 1. Car 1, and then this does the same thing basically. These are the receiver cars. And all this really does is it looks for whichever numbers that it has assigned to it. So in this case, this is car number 1, so 0 and 1 are the numbers that are assigned to it. And it just looks at those. And if that number equals 1, it's going to turn on the red. If it equals, or if it doesn't equal 1, it's going to set the red to 0, which is turning it off. If it equals 2, it's green. If it equals 3, it's blue. And any other case causes it to turn off. So if it's set to 0, it does just shut off. So anyway, that's all the receiver does. All the smarts are in the transmit unit. So anyway, that is the little bit of code that goes into this and the 3D models. Quite a few hours of research, quite a few hours, actually quite a ridiculous number of hours of soldering those LED rings and words and all that stuff. Quite a few hours 3D printing stuff. Anyway, a lot of work. It's paid off so far. Anyway, that's quite a bit of work that's gone into this thing so far, and there's still quite a bit more work to do. It obviously still needs side to top, and the bottom should actually be completed as well. Basically, there's still quite a bit to do to it, so not done yet. And one thing that I was thinking about doing is with these things, replacing the 3D printed parts that I made with laser cut parts, laser cut acrylic probably, because I should be able to go and find some company online that would do laser cutting on these sorts of parts, and that would look a whole lot better, and it would probably work quite a bit better too. But that was just one of the things that I was thinking about doing, is going to get laser cut parts, and I could also cut the tops, the top, the bottom, and the sides, and 2 end pieces of the car with that as well. Get those done at the same time. Just have a huge order of parts like this, which would be actually quite a nice thing to do, because it'd look a lot nicer. It'd be easier than trying to make my own tops and whatnot. But anyway, that's about all I have to show you on the computer. So one more thing that I should probably answer is why this thing actually took so long to build. And part of the reason is, after I did all that work drilling the holes and stuff, and I decided that the words didn't really turn out the way that I wanted to, minus train, it pretty much just stalled out because I ran out of ideas on what I could actually do. And then probably a little less than a year ago, I started working on doing 3D modeling on these things so that I could just 3D print them. And that actually worked out fairly well, so I started getting back into this project this year. And I finally got something that works, and I'm pretty happy with it, actually. I need to get some different trucks, and I would definitely like it if I got some trucks that actually had power tapped off of them. I'm not real sure if anyone knows of any good ones like that that aren't for like passenger cars. That would be pretty helpful for this. Anyway, that's a bit of an explanation video on what's going on with this thing, what it is, at least somewhat of an explanation of why it took so long, because I didn't really work on this thing constantly either, just in some extra spare time that I had. The last couple months I've been trying to work on it as much as I could, and I finally have gotten it into something that's well, kind of a working prototype, if you will. It's not a final product, obviously, because it needs a top, and the ends of the cars need to be on there, so you can't see the mess of wiring that's on the inside. One thing I am kind of concerned about is the reliability of these things. The solder joints don't seem to be all that great on a lot of them. It seems like they kind of pop off. I didn't do too great of a job doing all the soldering work and stuff like that. And also, with as close as these pins are together, it doesn't take much for them to kind of wiggle and then actually short out, and then you're missing a color once that happens, or maybe the blue and green get shorted together so you don't have different colors for blue and green, you kind of have a cyan color. So there's been some odd things going on here, but right now they work. It needs 2 more cars, but other than that, anyway, yeah, I need to make 2 more cars for this, and I need to finish up the sides and the ends. But other than that, this is actually turning out fairly nicely. It's pretty easy to read, and well, anyhow, that's about it for now, guys. The next video will be like a full-on running video of this thing, so stay tuned for that.